G'day, bird nerds. When best laid plans fall apart, I was always going to do that, Dave. I was going to forget to take the countdown on off loop. Hello, this is the Bird Emergency. I'm Grant. I'm a bird nerd, but I feel like I have imposter syndrome when I'm calling myself a bird nerd when I have Professor Dave Watson, Dr. Dave Watson, Dr. Dave from Twitter, ornithologist and ecologist from Charles Sturt University. Hello, Dave. You're from the, in 2015, you were from the Institute for Land, Water and Society at Charles Sturt University, but there's been an update.
Yeah, g'day, Grant. Good to be with you. Yes. So I've stayed the same. Just the tapestry around me has moved. So what was the Institute for Land, Water and Society has gone away, and various other research organisations at my university also went away at the same time, and they were replaced by the all-singing, all-dancing, multidisciplinary Gulbali Institute. And so that's both enviro stuff, but also agricultural stuff. So we're now in the same organisation with all sorts of fine agricultural researchers, and I'm down for it because I think some of the huge gains to be made in conservation worldwide, but especially in Australia, is in farming landscapes and working with farmers and with agricultural industry.
There's no doubt about that. I mean, the simple facts are that in a perfect world we would do things perfectly, but we're not in a perfect world, and so much of Australia's economic well-being is based on agricultural practices that we would like to fix,
Yep.
as well as mining practices and whatnot that we would like to scale back or fix. So it's important that the people whose focus is on those activities are hopefully, I mean, have you installed an osmosis lab where the research principles are absorbed by?
Yeah, we're getting there. We're getting there. I think we are cut from a slightly different cloth. So finding that common vocab can be a challenge. But I think a lot of the rusted on agricultural types are refreshingly pleased when we have a good chat and they realise I'm not some full-on hardcore greeny vegan zealot. That I'm a reasonable fellow. I'm not out to undermine their entire industry. And I think for me, it's all about win-wins. For me, it's finding those win-wins. And there's many, but we don't do enough to celebrate them.
Well, congratulations on covering up your blue hair so that they all feel more comfortable, Dave.
Indeed.
Hello to everyone on all the platforms, Twitch, Twitter X, what do we got? And we've got the Facebookies and the YouTubes in as well. So fantastic. Dave, I did warn you earlier on. This is Loz.
Lovely.
Loz is my avian advisor, my housemate. I'll just fill you in, Dave. Most people have heard this story, but while we were doing the New Year's Eve live stream, and I was here in the $1 million studio, my housemate was out checking out the family fireworks that occur early in the evening.
Sure.
And at that time, that thing turned up on the windowsill of the lounge room. And as my housemate walked over, Loz went to the ground and was walking over, and was obviously approaching him. And I'm in here talking, about stuff. My housemate knocks on my window of the studio.
Got a fan.
Some people think it's a bedroom, but no, it's $1 million studio. And tapped on the window and said, "Oh, there's a rainbow lorikeet." And I'm going, "Yeah, so?" And he goes, "No, here, rainbow lorikeet." And I go, "What?" And anyway, long and the short of it is, it obviously was a pet, was obviously not in good condition, and New Year's Eve, there's dogs and cats running amok with fireworks and everything.
Sure.
So, so I put Loz up the top of my cupboard where it was quiet and dark and calmed him down because this was right on dusk when we got him in. And of course, I didn't have anything at all prepared to look after a lorikeet. New Year's Day, the next day, still have nothing. Went up to a garage sale, got the biggest cage I could find and a stand, and then bought all the food, the right food and everything.
Yeah. Right.
Started feeding him up. I took him to get microchipped or to check if there was microchip. No microchip. Couldn't find any on Facebook or Gumtree or any neighbourhood stuff.
Yes, so you reckon he escaped during all the fireworks and stuff? He just busted it?
No, I think he'd been out longer. I think he'd been out a bit longer. He was still flying, but only a matter of 3 or 4 metres. So I think he was from somewhere local, or somebody's released him because they're hard work. They're hard work. You have to be a real bird person,
sure,
and you also have to be in a situation where your neighbours are far enough away that it doesn't annoy them. Also, having hundreds of rainbow lorikeets flying around here, people are not hearing an unusual loud noise when he starts up in the morning.
Yep.
So that's a bonus. Anyway, that's the story of Loz, and he's now quite fit, very confident. I'm in the process of training him and get him into a harness soon, and I've just ordered a much bigger cage, but he's mostly out. But he's got to be safe, and we've got parrot beak and feather disease, so I want him on a harness and in a backpack so I can take him out when I go out. You know, have you seen those birdie backpacks with the?
No, I don't know much about bird keeping.
Okay, they're like, it's just like a backpack, but it's rigged up like a small cage with gauze, and you can put the clear plastic over the top, so you can take your companion out with you when you've got to go and do stuff, and they're safe, but they're not bored and they're not alone because they do bond, and it takes a lot longer to train him for a harness, but then I can free fly him, but make sure he doesn't come in contact with wild birds and going to places where I've seen wild birds feeding, because the beak and feather disease is a big big risk. So lots of cockatoos around here have got it. So yeah. So bird nerds, we're going to talk about mistletoe today. How is that a bird story? Well, it's a bird story because mistletoes are good for birds. And let's start at the beginning, Dave. Tell us how your interest in mistletoes began. Actually, first, I just assume everyone knows what a mistletoe is, but
yeah, I can dive in there.
Over to you.
Right. All right, people. Thanks for tuning in. So, just quickly. So, mistletoe is a parasitic plant. Many of you will know what I'm talking about. You're walking down the road, and there's a clump of foliage in a tree. It's a bit different. The colour's not quite the same. It's like a teardrop shaped. That's what we're talking about. So mistletoes are a group of flowering plants. Rather than a single lineage, it's a way of being a plant, like a succulent or a mangrove. There are many different kinds of mangroves. There's a mangrove palm. So mangroves are a plant that lives, a woody plant that lives in seawater. Mistletoes are a group of plants that are 3 things. They're parasitic, they're woody, and they attach to their host above ground. So if you are looking at a plant that's parasitic and woody and bolted onto a plant, to a tree or a shrub or whatever above ground, you're looking at a mistletoe. That thing, that way of being a plant, evolved independently 5 times, all from the same neighbourhood, all from the sandalwood sort of group, but they're not one lineage, they're 5 lineages. So my interest in mistletoe stretches back to my childhood, growing up in suburban Melbourne and seeing when the oak trees, the pin oak trees in around Camberwell, where I grew up, had lost their leaves. little Davy is like, "Hey, mum, what's that? That's weird." It's like, "Oh, that's mistletoe." It's like, "Yeah, well, there you go." And then I really got into it during my honours year at Monash. I was doing work in Western Victoria, looking at birds and remnants of bull oak woodlands in the Wimmera. And there's a bunch of groovy mistletoes out there, including one of my favourites, the bull oak mistletoe, which looks just like a casuarina. It's uncanny.
Yep.
And I was there for a big eruption of both black honeyeaters and white-fronted honeyeaters. And they were just in all my sites where there were lots of mistletoes. It's like, cool birds hanging out around mistletoes. Well, that's kind of noteworthy. So jotted down a few notes. I think my first paper ever in the Australian Birdwatcher was about the black honeyeater mistletoe connection back in the glory days of '95. So previous millennium. And then went to the States, did my PhD on completely different stuff. So mistletoe did figure in my PhD, but just as a side note, nothing major. I was looking at birds in cloud forests, long-term fragmentation, that kind of business, so whole community level stuff, but different part of the world. And so I got lots of experiences there with mistletoes there. So if you want to find hummingbirds, if you want to find euphonias, if you want to find all sorts of cool things in those forests, a bit like in the bush here in woodlands, just park yourself under a tree with a whole lot of mistletoe and just let it all wash over you. So post PhD, I was scoping out things to do, applying for jobs, and I basically published all the work from my PhD and thought, look, let's dive into this mistletoe caper, because the more I travel around, there just seems to be something about it. There seems to be something about the connections between these quirky plants and not just birds, but diversity generally. And so dived right into it then, and then just became known as Dave the Mistletoe Guy. And even though it's a fraction of what I do, it's one of my favorite research areas, and it's an area that I'm sort of on top of globally. So I've got collaborators in Latin America, in Europe, in various corners of the world, and they're good people. What keeps me in the mistletoe caper is mistletoe people. They're good. They're good eggs.
Do you prefer bird people or mistletoe people, Dave?
Oh, see, bird people, it's a big, big, broad church. There's a lot of fantastic people who are bird people. The mistletoe people world, certainly in the scientific area, is smaller, weirder, and more diverting.
And just to follow on that thread, are all mistletoe people sandalwood people? Since they've evolved out of the sandalwoods, like, do you
Indeed,
have
indeed, most embrace the parasitic habit more broadly, but they come from many walks of life. So there's foresters, there's hardcore plant anatomists who study the structure of it. You've got many different. That's part of the beauty of that group of scientists, is they come from many different corners. Paleobotanists, all sorts of different skills they bring to the table. So yeah, great dinner time company for sure.
so? Before we step back on the sort of importance of mistletoes for birds and some of the history about why mistletoe basically had disappeared from Melbourne, but I think this was a trend. I think this was sort of a global Western horticultural principle that mistletoes were bad and you pruned them out of certainly specimen trees. But before we get to those issues, can you talk a little bit about the 5 lineages of mistletoe? And I'll just preface by saying, in Australia, I've always noticed how the mistletoes have evolved to be great mimics. Like, there are mistletoe that look almost exactly like their acacia host or their eucalyptus host, or as you said, their bull oak host. So there's are they representative of the different lineages, or are the 5
Okay.
lineages you were talking about, have they come and gone over time, or?
So we don't know much about what's gone over time. There probably were other lineages that appeared and then disappeared at some point down the road. I'm talking about right now. Today, you can wander around the planet and find plants that are parasitic, that have woody tissue, and that attach to their host above ground. Those three, the Holy Trinity, and there are 5 lineages of those. So of those 5, one are the Mesodendron, and these are families. So this is at the family level, okay? And they're all in the Sandalales order. So that's the group that includes sandalwoods, Exocarpus, all sorts of things. So they're mostly root parasites, but 5 lineages of root parasite independently climbed up into the canopy and said, hey, wow, we can do this slurping thing up here. And there's more light, there's fewer hungry mouths, so it's win-win. So of the 5 lineages, there's the Mesodendronaceae, the feathery mistletoes. They're a Patagonian endemic, and they're just in Nothofagus in Southern Beach. They're by far the longest lived mistletoes. They grow with the tree. They attach to the main trunk, and as the trunk grows, the mistletoe grows with it. So you can have 200-300-year-old mistletoes, just craziness. They look a bit, they're sort of blue-grey and fleecy, and their fruits are wind dispersed. So they're quite a different beast. There's five.
Sorry, Dave. So they're not glaucous. They're sort of blue-grey, but they're not glaucous like Eriostomans feel glaucous, and how a lot of Aeromophilus do.
A bit of both. The foliage is blue-grey, but certainly the reproductive parts do have those fleecy hairs attached to them as well. Okay. So they double down, and that helps them stay airborne when they're wind dispersed. So that's feathery mistletoes, just in Patagonia. Then there's 2 other obscure tropical groups that are in the tropics, in Southeast Asia, in Latin America. One of those sneaks into Australia, monotypic genus Reinweightia, and that's a bit like Dodder. It's a creeping, viney thing. So it's a twining mistletoe, and you can find that in the top end.
I was going to say, is that in the dry woodlands of?
It is.
So that
it is. And then the other 2 lineages are the ones that people would be more familiar with. There's the Lawrenthaceae, the showy mistletoes, or the ones that that I just described at the start, like in eucalypts, with the big obvious, often red
with the yellow, orange, red flowers that you usually see.
Yeah. And then the other, and that's by far the most diverse group. Like there's 700-800 of those species worldwide, and there's about
700 in Australia or something. I think, is that right?
No, 97 total.
97 in Australia. There we go. I didn't exaggerate that much.
And then the final family is Viscaceae, and they're known as the true mistletoes, because that's the quintessential European mistletoe with the jointed leaves and the white berries. So that's a European species, and the Viscaceae is found worldwide as well, but with a centre of diversity in Africa. But you see those 2 lineages, the Viscaceae and the Lawrenthaceae, account for the vast majority of mistletoes. And the Viscaceae is derived from Laurasia, so a northern origin that's since spread south, and then the reverse with Lawrenthaceae. Lawrenthaceae is a Gondwana-derived group that was in Australia, 65 million years ago when we were still attached to Antarctica. So they're more Australian than most things.
Now, mistletoes have a sticky seed
they do.
That attaches itself, or is attached by maybe fecal dispersal with birds, for instance, or maybe stuck on the face or beaks of birds and larger insects and things. Is that strategy for dispersal common across all of those mistletoe groups?
Pretty much, with the exception of the feathery mistletoes, the Nothofagus dudes in Patagonia that rely on wind dispersal. All the rest have sticky seeds and rely on animals for long distance dispersal. A few have these explosively dehiscent fruits where the tiny little fruits, like the size of, like they're mini, size of a coriander seed, that they build up, and then one little seed, and about a sesame seed size seed, can go meters. This is in dwarf mistletoes that are parasites of conifers, mostly in North America and mostly in the west of North America. So the United States, Mexico in particular. But then animals, even with those guys that do disperse in that unique way, they do land on birds and mammals, and that's how you get longer distance dispersal. But yeah, traditionally, most species of mistletoe rely on animals for dispersal, and then they either regurgitate the seeds in a little pellet, or defecate them out, or as you say, they're on their face, they're on their wings. So external dispersal, preen it off, wipe your beak, and hey presto, a mistletoe is born.
And with that method, that's why you will often see trees that have been colonised by one mistletoe can often 3, 4, 5 years later have this very dense clump. They're not evenly dispersed around the plant. Now, one thing I always notice with mistletoes when they're in flower is that they flower when their host is not flowering. And
that's a fellow. Is
well, I'm bird nerd and horticulturist, Dave, so I'm always looking at those things. So that's one of the elements that makes them really valuable in two settings in the Australian context. One, in suburbia and particularly cities, and in, let's talk about two of my favourite birds to talk about, the regent honeyeater and the swift parrot, who rely on drier country woodlands that are rapidly disappearing still. I mean, it's insane that we're still clearing prime habitat for those birds. But mistletoe can provide, depending on the species, an early lead in to the main flowering eucalypt season, and a trailing edge food source.
So there's the plant nerds out there will say, yes, use the word, Dave. So the word is complementary phenology. Mistletoes, because they're parasites, they have far more control over their reproductive schedule than other plants. Most other plants, I think of your classic eucalypts. It's here we go. Just don't look at me. Look at the eucalypts.
There we are. Look, there's the star of your Twitter.
So there's a eucalypt. So just imagine that bad boy. It might want to flower at all, any manner of seasons, but it's constrained by soil moisture. So flowering for a tree is a big effort. It requires a lot of nutrients. It requires a lot of water. And so typically you see plants flowering at that time of the year when they've got more access to those limiting factors than at other times of the year. Mistletoes, if they want more resources, they just slurp it out of the tree they're attached to. So to maximize pollination success, they time, as you say, their flowering to be at the time when not just the host isn't flowering, but the whole stand, the whole ecosystem that they're in, they go for the time when nothing or almost nothing has flowers available. So then they're the one store open in town. You want nectar? Come to Casa del Mistletoe, and you'll have abundant, tasty treats. So they do this worldwide, but in Australia, in every month of the year, there'll be at least one mistletoe species with nectar available, flowering, and another mistletoe species with fleshy fruit available. So they've got that really broad flowering season that coincides with periods of regional scarcity. So from a pollination point of view, very important when those key, mass flowering species like eucalypts aren't available, you can generally find a bit of a bite to eat with mistletoes. And so some work I did with Ross Crates and the Difficult Bird Group out of Canberra, we looked at Regent honeyeater, had 2,000 sites right across southeastern Australia, and found that the single greatest predictor for nectar feeding bird diversity was how many mistletoes are there in that area. It's disproportionately important, even though it's a minor component of the canopy, because it provides nectar when nothing else does. It's really important for pollinator communities. And then with a collaborator in Chile, Francisco Fonturibel, we found that mistletoes, like in Australia, die after drought. They need constant water supply, and if the host that they're attached to is feeling a bit thirsty and starts to restrict water flow to some branches, mistletoes keel over. So that's happened in Australia. That's happening in Chile as well. And we found in those areas that the hummingbird, the southernmost hummingbird, Stephanoides, that's the pollinator of mistletoe. It depends on mistletoe for many months of the year when nothing else is around. If mistletoes all curl up and die, the hummingbirds switch from being year-round residents to seasonal migrants. And so the whole stand suffers. Pollination success goes way down because they've lost their resident, group of pollinators. So these interactions, while you might think, pollination is just one bird and just one plant, big deal, that can send ripples through an entire ecosystem because of that. Those issues around complementarity.
One of the reasons I've been so keen to talk to you about this, and we might note, I've been hassling Dave to talk about mistletoes for 12 months or so, and is that knowing what we know, what you've just told us, and how a species like the regent honeyeater can be supported by the availability of mistletoe, and that there's that threat that if we only pursue the strategy of relying on food trees that are native trees, and that the mistletoes might naturally be colonised by natural methods, honeyeaters, mistletoe birds, whatever, visiting those trees. If in times of drought, that open all hours supermarket is going to be knocked off, we have the opportunity in all these wild natural corridors that birds can use, and bats and possums, but roads, fence lines, oases being parklands, local botanic gardens, whatnot. Now, I was telling you earlier, I was studying horticulture in 1993 and 94, parks and gardens management. And I had friends who were doing arboriculture. And we were seeking and destroying mistletoes in parks and street trees and avenues. And I don't think any of it was research based. I think there was just an assumption that mistletoes are weakening and destroying trees. A tree that is infested with mistletoe is at danger of falling over and causing damage. Therefore, we will remove all the mistletoe. Same way as any branch that is showing some decay, we will remove because it's dangerous. So it's come a long way. That certainly was the way arborists and arboriculturalists were operating back then. Things have changed. And I think the way arborists are taught now, and I've given many talks to the arborists, professional societies, and their conferences. They've come a long way, certainly with branches, as you say, with mortality. They're now doing habitat pruning. They're putting hollows intentionally in trees for habitat. And with mistletoes, there's now a widely recognised understanding amongst practicing arborists that unless it's over a schoolyard or an overbalanced or
branch,
a car park, or
all of that, then fine, go ahead, whip out the saw. But otherwise, native plant doing its thing, leave it alone. And I think one of the reasons for this hatred, towards mistletoe, that must be controlled, as you say, get rid of it. It's the P word, parasite. Humans.
Yeah.
As a broader, society, what I refer to as Kmart shoppers, think of parasites as necessarily bad. Like if your kids have parasites, they can't go to daycare. And so we think of parasites as these nefarious, terrible, icky things. And now we know, look, there's actually more species of parasitic animal in the universe than there are hosts. So parasites are actually the silent majority. And yes, by definition, a parasite takes. It takes from its host. That's what makes it a parasite without killing it. But you can do that in many, many ways. You can do that in such a subtle way, in such an almost undetectable way that the host either doesn't know or doesn't care. So I think in broader ecology, there's still a bit of a, don't scare the horses thing with parasites, and that they're probably bad. But I think like ecological parasitology today, it's much more of a spectrum, and there's all sorts of really worthy case studies demonstrating when having parasites can actually be a beneficial thing, and the effect of parasites on their hosts varies in terms of the vigor of the host, resource availability in the wider assemblage. So parasites equals bad equals must be controlled. You're going to come up against that a lot with pets in the livestock industry, but certainly nurserymen, arborists, they're no longer being trained that way. And I think we're in fierce agreement about the benefits of mistletoes. And they're a beautiful thing. A mistletoe in a tree makes a beautiful tree just that much more beautiful.
I particularly like the ones that parasitize the Grevillea robusta in the really established gardens around Melbourne, because when the Grevillea robusta is forming flowers, around here on my side of town, the mistletoe are flowering earlier, so they're a food source well before the really heaviest period of flowering for the silky oaks around town. So the honey eaters that want to get going early have got a bonanza. And
they do.
And insects, of course, and bats.
And there's a much higher concentration of carbohydrates in mistletoe nectar too. So it's good stuff. It's packed with goodies.
Hello, Kathy. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm glad someone's finally commented on LinkedIn. Great to see Kathy Cavallo. Kathy should be on my hit list as a guest as well. I think at some stage.
For sure, she's a legend.
Yeah, dead set. I've been too scared to ask Kathy.
No,
I'm too nobody. I just had to check. I think Loz just aimed a projectile, but it just missed my coffee. So that was that was good. Good on you, Loz. Good to have you here, Kathy. Hope it's not the last time. We always try and have interesting chats like this. Dave, when we're devoting a lot of resources, both pure research, but also insurance populations for a bird like the Regent honeyeater, don't we owe it to explore perhaps mechanical intervention, like human physical on purpose intervention to spread mistletoes into the parklands and those natural corridors I talked about, where we are trying to extend and encourage the Regent honeyeater to extend its I don't want to say normal range, because they're very opportunist. We don't really know what their normal range is, because it's so variable on environmental conditions, on seasonal conditions year to year.
We're doing just this. So Christy Peters and Mick Todd at BirdLife Australia, based in the Newcastle area, they're leading the charge with a project doing exactly this in the Hunter, getting mistletoe back in trees with the Minda Aboriginal Corporation, so with traditional owner buy-in, putting seeds in trees in areas where regents are occasionally seen, but they don't hang around because there's not much tucker. So we're adding mistletoe to the canopy of those trees specifically for regents. So that's happening now.
Great. I just didn't see anything when I was searching the literature. Oh, I didn't see anything. Did I just disappear for a minute?
Briefly, but that's okay. I know what you look like.
That's Loz jumping on the keyboard. You're causing havoc today. He's just thrown every one of my brightly coloured zip drives off the desk. I like to have lots of very colourful things to distract him. He's not interested in the ball today. It's all about the zip drives and the keyboard. Kathy too. By the way, thanks. Kathy said thanks, Dave. Right back at you. And Kathy said she would like to share the video on Remember the Wild. I will give you access to the video once I've edited it a bit, Kathy, and can save you 15 minutes of my waffle. that might be preferable. Oh, Loz, you're going to be a star, Loz. Dave, how about should we be thinking more laterally as a sort of conservation environment movement in general, supported by the nursery industry, the garden industry, that our small bats, I think some of the fruit pigeons will also utilise mistletoes.
Sure.
So there's so many species. Obviously, insects. I'm assuming, I don't know, but I'm assuming that there will be native ants that will be taking mistletoes and storing the seeds that then get spread around in a time of flood, perhaps.
No, ants don't do that. But plenty of things move the seeds around. Mostly birds, occasionally mammals. So gliders, fruit flying foxes, occasionally, but they are reliant on birds for the job. But in terms of broader resources, yes, they're widely visited. They're very tasty, the whole plant, including the leaves. And unlike often the hosts that they're in that defend their leaves with nasty chemicals or spines or whatever, mistletoes they're live fast, die young kind of critters. So they don't invest. They don't hang on to their leaves for very long. They don't defend them. And so from a herbivore's point of view, easy to eat, palatable, full of goodies. And the way they continue to draw moisture from their host is by maintaining very high concentrations of nutrients in their tissues. So something like a brush-tailed possum. Oh, look, here we go. I've got my friend here. There's Sunny.
Very good. We're very animal friendly. I'm distracting.
There's a python behind me somewhere. So herbivores go out of their way to eat mistletoe, full of goodies, and both big things like marsupials, brushies especially, but also tiny things. There's many butterflies, many native Australian butterflies, preferentially lay their eggs on mistletoe clumps. The only thing the larvae eat is fresh mistletoe foliage.
So, there's mayhem going on here. I should say, if you aren't following Dr. Dave, look what are you doing, Loz? He's all over the place on my. He's all over the keyboard. This is the first time you've been an agent of chaos, Loz, but he's usually just flying back and forward. If you haven't seen Dave before, you don't follow him on Twitter, you will. Dave is a purveyor of fine aquariums. What do we call is it a herpetarium? What's the correct terminology for your reptilian?
You can call it whatever you want.
Pythonarium. And the tree that Dave showed us earlier is the tree that Dave generally focuses on for his good morning message on Twitter or Twitter X. Now, Dave, you're Dr. Dave on Twitter, but it's with a K. And
no, not a K.
Oh no, that's Dr. Nick, isn't it? Beg your pardon.
So the O's in doctor are zeros.
Zeros, that's right.
Sonny, don't be a bad dog. Bad dogs go to hell.
But if you want to find Dave on Twitter, just search David Watson, and you will find several people pop up. Look for the beard, okay? Look for the beard. And I think at the moment on Twitter, you're holding the bird, aren't you?
Yeah, it's
Hanging, I think.
good
Yeah.
bird too. White
So
back swallow.
that's right. That's right. So that's how you find Dave on Twitter. Apart from going Dr. Dave, every O is a zero. Okay.
Or just Watson mistletoe. There's many
Yeah.
searches that I'm
Oh yeah.
sure.
Yeah. And Dave does an amazing video series, occasional series of what bird is that? Because
Awesome
Dave's
birds.
Awesome Birds is very, very good with his bird calls. And I wish I was a fraction as good as you.
Stop growling. There's someone walking their dog and she can just see it, so she's very concerned.
Our dog here, Shadow, does that too because we look onto the park.
Oh wow!
So we get to watch everyone walking their dogs, kids having a lot of fun, and meth deals and shooting up.
Oh, nice. Nice.
Out the
The
front.
full combo. That's great.
Mate, no one has to tell me how bad the drugs problem is in the cities of Australia. It's amazing. A whole lot of new litter problems too. Remember we used to say cigarette butts are the worst litter because they get into the storm water and into the wetlands.
Yeah, and never decompose. Sure.
What about these bloody vape containers? What's
Yeah,
inside them?
we pick up rubbish on the side of the road around our village, and lots of those with the batteries, like a battery in there.
That's one of the major sources of litter around here now, and after every big deluge, they're getting into the stormwater system, and I hope that they're getting collected and taken out and not getting into the bay because the toxins in them must be terrible.
Bad news.
Anyway, let's talk about a few more of the things that mistletoes give to birds, particularly.
Okay. Well, a big one.
Well, I want to do it in two steps, if you don't mind, Dave. Opportunities for nesting for birds because they're great cover, and that woodland birds particularly benefit from them in a way that you may not have thought of. I certainly didn't, but I didn't actually know that the study that you did in 2015 had actually compared one practice. So let's start with the cover for nesting first.
So nesting. So there's I've done a lot of studies on this, and it's not just an Australian thing. This is worldwide. So again, if you think of a tree with mistletoe in it, many Australian trees are pretty sparse, are pretty open in the canopy, and that's not necessarily the ideal structure for concealing a nest or attaching a nest for a bird that nests in tree canopies. And so we looked at this and found that about 3/4 of Australian birds that nest in trees have been recorded nesting in mistletoes. So it's a huge number, and many of them seem to go out of their way to do it. Almost every spotted harrier nest described is in a mistletoe. Most of the bowerbirds, most bowerbirds, many birds of prey, and then things like diamond firetails, a lot of finches. So small things like to bury their nest like in the clump. Big things like to plonk their nest directly on top of the structure itself. Little eagles, the quintessential little eagle nest is on a mistletoe in a yellow box in a nice floodplain, fertile soil situation. So we looked at why they do this, and as well as finding evidence that they've got lower predation rates using fake nests and fake eggs. I think the real answer is microclimate. So mistletoe foliage has a much higher content of water in it, and a nest surrounded by mistletoe foliage is in a little insulated bubble in the canopy. So when it gets stinking hot, it's insulated. When it gets really chilly, it's insulated, and when it gets bone dry, it benefits from that evapotranspiration from the mistletoes. And if you think of little naked nestling birds that have trouble regulating their own temperature, it's like a humidity crib in the canopy.
Mistletoe leaves sought after because they don't have that chemical makeup, including the toxins
Exactly.
and allelopaths that
Exactly.
the that
And
the
they've got so much
eucalypts
water in
have
them,
in.
they sink. If you drop a mistletoe leaf into the water, it sinks. So they're different. They're put together differently. And then just to follow through, so the other work that I've done started with a large scale experiment where we took mistletoe out of 20 entire woodlands and looked at 20 other woodlands to see, what changes. Within 3 years of removing mistletoe at the woodland scale, we lost a third of our bird species, a third. Yeah, there we go. That's just, if you're having trouble sleeping, listeners, just start leafing through that, and you'll be out like a light. But that community scale response was driven by insectivores, specifically ground foraging insectivores. So things like babblers, robins, choughs, those kind of jobbies, and it's all to do with the litter. So
Dave,
mistletoe churns. Yep.
not true babblers or true robins,
Mate,
Australian robins and Australian
let's use
babblers.
proper terminology, petroikidae,
Okay.
then we know what we're talking about. And it's litter. So mistletoes churn through their leaves. They don't hang on to them for years like a eucalypt does. They hang on to them for a few months and then drop them with all those goodies in them intact. And that's like adding crack to a woodland. It's just things go bananas once that's there. These are poor soils, very carbon-rich litter, whereas mistletoe litter has a lot of nitrogen in it, a lot of phosphorus, a lot of calcium. And so add that to the mix, decomposition rate magnifies, and then all those invertebrate communities that depend on detritus, on this breaking down leaves and the fungi and the bacteria doing the job, those insect and spider groups, their numbers go through the roof. So we've done experimental trials on this, adding mistletoe litter, taking it away, looking at different ratios. And by adding mistletoes to the sorts of densities you see in your average box-gum grassy woodland, you're adding more than 1 million invertebrates per hectare per year of just the kind of invertebrates that we know these ground foraging insectivores need. So that's not just important from them residing in an area, but if you've ever had a nesting bird nearby that you've been watching and the attending parents coming and going, having chicks, you need a steady source of food. And with insectivores, that's increasingly hard to find in these little pocket handkerchiefs of bush we've got left. So mistletoes in those areas, yes, they're an important resource for nesting. They're an important resource for nectar and for fruit. But what drove the whole community scale, influence of mistletoe is their litter, is that pathway to brown food web, as it's known, of falling to the ground and then really accelerating decomposition dynamics and bringing in all these decomposing insects and the spiders that feed on them. And that's why our insectivorous birds are in so much trouble, is because there's just not enough tucker for them.
It seems like a strategy that offers so many opportunities in so many different situations. I mean, think of all of the degraded agricultural land that could be improved in productivity in isolated spots, but that can then be expanded over time just by putting mistletoes into the trees that are in paddocks.
And often you don't have to put it there. It's just stop wrecking it. Stop getting rid of it.
Stop taking it out.
Exactly.
I did note with some interest. I do remember how this was in your article in the conversation that I saw this. I remember at college where we would be aggressively pruning out mistletoe and also using those wick application herbicide wands.
Yep.
But you mentioned flamethrowers. I had never seen anyone using a flamethrower on a mistletoe. Where did that happen?
Yep, that's done. I studied that just out of Gungahlin in Canberra. There's Mexican arborists use drones. There's many different ways to get rid of mistletoe, but for the most part, it's just a waste of effort, and it comes back anyway, quite often. But and a lot of it comes down just from a fundamental misunderstanding that they're native organisms with this real network of really important interactions that release these nutrients from these long-lived organisms, trees that are misers that worked hard to get all these goodies. That they hang on to them. And mistletoes are like Robin Hoods. They get in there and they free up all these resources and they give them to everybody.
Well, we've only got about halfway through what I had wanted to talk about today, but that's how it always goes.
Well, I'll make this round one. You know where to find me.
That's right. I was just going to say that we talked about having an opportunity to talk about a lot more positive things in this ecology conservation space.
That'll make a good chat next time because I've given got there. And it's there's ways, and not just ways of deluding yourself, but actually concrete ways that I find help.
Yeah, and also it's so difficult to stay positive and motivated when you're not getting any the reinforcement that I think we need. But Dave, being Dr. Dave and a professor at Charles Sturt University, has to go and impart some knowledge on impressionable young and probably some middle-aged minds. So,
alas.
Dave, thanks so much for
my pleasure, me.
I always enjoy it. If you come on again, you get friend of the show badge. You have to do 3. Once you've done 3 appearances, you're friend of the show. So,
look out. All right, done deal.
Yeah. All right, Dave. Well, thanks so much.
Yes,
I'll put all Dave's contact stuff in the stuff. Now, Dave's going to have to nick off, but you can stick around because I want to follow up on something that Kathy said. Thanks again, Dave. Spotted harriers is one of my favourites. Kathy, I thought of something that I'm in the middle of doing at the moment. I went to my... I'll go slightly off topic and tell you. I go to my local shopping mall frequently I go early so that I miss people. But the other day I had to go in the afternoon, mid-morning. I think it was just after the lunchtime rush, and I arrived there only minutes after a knife attack in the supermarket, which was terribly, terribly depressing. But while I was there, there's a new shop, and it's a bookshop. We haven't had a bookshop in our shopping mall here for, 6, 7 years. So it was very exciting, and I opened it up, and, I didn't open it up. I walked in as soon as it opened the other morning, went straight to nature, gardening, animals, had a look, and had Daryl Jones's getting to know the birds in your neighbourhood there. Tim Lowe's book, what's it got? The beginning of song, where song began. A couple of others, but it had. I've blanked on George's surname, but it had George's, I think 50 amazing birds or something, and that got me thinking about talking about doing a video and talking about some of my favourite birds. And I was trying to narrow it down to 10, and I don't think I can. But certainly in the top 10 is the spotted harrier, of which Kathy had mentioned. So, Kathy, if you're still here, tell me the first time you saw a spotted harrier. Because they're so striking when you actually get a good look at them. They're so laconic if you're seeing them just flying, just cruising from one place to another. But I'd never thought until Dave mentioned about where they're nesting. I just never seen them nesting. I've never seen them with chicks. Yeah. Thanks, Kathy. Yeah, great. Yeah, Georgia Angus. fantastic article. Was it in the Guardian or in the Conversation recently that Georgia had put out about her feeling about bird watching? How those beautiful feelings that we get. Here we go. Great. The first time that Kathy saw a spotted harrier was in the Northern Territory after years of wishing and looking. Yeah, I hadn't seen a spotted harrier for years and years and years and years, but I did see a couple when I was away with Millie Formby and this was Western Queensland and Northern Territory. They were far more frequent when I was much younger in Victoria, growing up, and I'd seen them in Central West New South Wales when I was much younger, but for years and years and years and years didn't spy one at all. But in the bird watching sort of groups that I'm a member of, that they're popping up quite regularly, as are little eagles in Melbourne. So that's great. Now, here's the story. Good on you, Kathy, for playing the game. So Kathy says it flew right above us on the road and gave us several lovely lazy turns. Yeah, that's it, don't they? They sort of wheel around in a laconic fashion. See its incredible plumage. I'm very interested to know about the association with mistletoe because they're not a common bird to see. And now I know a little bit more about where to look. Yeah, that was a great tip by Dave. Got to say, Dave's Google Scholar is well worth trawling through, and the CSU sort of magazine, is that what they call it, or their website for the for Dave's school. Or for Dave's department, I don't know what's the right terminology these days, is really interesting. Where was I going with that? Oh yeah, let's get a bit parasocial here. My housemate often says to me, "Why do you get up at 2 a.m?" And yeah, I'm insane. I get up at 2 a.m. And one is so that I can watch a lot of crap, so that I can see what's going on in the world, like finding out that there's a freedom conference coming up here. It's going to be somewhere in Melbourne, I don't know where. But Tucker Carlson and Clive Palmer are the headline speakers. So, wow, look out for that. Don't miss the opportunity to get into that. But the other thing that I do really early at 2 a.m, apart from editing stuff and just letting the computer render things that need to be done and everything, is I go and read all these papers so that I have some kind of idea of what I'm talking about when I reach out to interview people. So I recommend it highly. And the good thing is you can be binging Scandi drama on SBS On Demand on one screen, and you can be reading amazing research, maybe about lapwings in Finland. That was one I was reading the other day. So, Kathy, if you're still here, would you like to tell us what what are the latest projects you've been working on? That might be cool. I might even bring a couple up, and we can have a sort of disjointed conversation about that. Also, I would like to know, now I know most of you Twitterers, I know most of you X and Twitterers are just going to be lurkers, but hey, Facebook and Twitch, it's time for you to tell us a bird watching story that's half as good as Kathy's. If you're in Australia, do you know the spotted harrier? And actually, I'll ask a real hard one. Any of you seen a red goshawk? That's another beauty. So we're just open for chit chat now. So in the comments, pop in whatever you would like to whatever you would like to say. We'll see whether there's a few more comments, and if not, I'll be nicking off. I need to let you know that Habitat Gardening is on again, 9:30 a.m. Saturday morning before you go off and do some pruning or some plant buying. Actually, let me just. I just want to see the question I wanted to ask Dave, and I should have checked with him whether he had to nick off at 2 or 2:30. Where can you buy mistletoes if you are wanting to? Where to buy mistletoe near me? Okay, Mr. Google. Oh, here we are. Just having a look. Well, you can buy it. That doesn't look like a local one. These look like decorative. Here we go. No. All right, I'm going to have to do a bit more work on that. No doubt there'll be a Indigenous flora and fauna affiliated nursery, I would say. Otherwise, I'll reach out to Dave and ask him where people might be able to find a mistletoe. Actually, can you propagate mistletoe from cuttings? I'm not sure you could, but let's find out. Let's just check this out. Mistletoe propagation can be tricky. You need the right conditions and a suitable tree host. No, I'm not saying that you can grow it from anything other than seed. So, no. All right. Good on you, Kathy. Thank you. Yeah, this is the project I wanted to talk to you about. Kathy said, "Oh gosh," since I challenged her to tell us about the project she's working on now. I can't type quickly enough to get through them, but we're producing a feature film on Malleefowl with the National Malleefowl Recovery Group, and that might be up your listeners' alley. Here's a behind the peak scene. Okay, I will put that in, and I'll follow you up. I've also asked Hugh Possingham, and I wanted to get hold of Danny as well. I want to do a bit of an arc on mound builders in Australia. I've got brush turkeys coming up too, so yeah. I will reach out, Kathy, and we'll get you on and get you featured. And Cassie says got a dash. Well, of course, because it's coming up to that time where everyone's got to go and do afternoon things. Thanks for the great mistletoe chat. We got a mistletoe bird hanging around our place at the moment. No mistletoe in our trees. Hopefully it seeds some on our yellow box. That would be great. And then you might get some regent honey eaters or something turning up. Or how amazing would that be to get a spotted harrier nesting at your place, Kathy? That would be fab. Hello, Betty. Nice to see you here too today. Thanks, Kathy, for jumping in the comments, being a good sport. Makes these live shows much more interesting when that's happening. And thanks to Dr. Dave again, and hopefully he'll be back. Not in like 2 years. Like I think it's taken nearly 2 years to get him back on, just from everyone being busy. Now, Betty says Eastern Spinebills ×2 feeding on your coria. Now, Betty, what coria are you growing? Have you got Coria reflexa, or have you got one of the specialties, one of the cultivars? And Salvia's all day. Qualigo got light rain here for the last 2 days. Well, that's great. I can see that the weather patterns, I think you're going to get a fair bit of rain over the next week. So hopefully it's rain you need and not too much rain. You've got Federation Bells. Is that the one you've got, Betty? Federation something, Betty said. That will be the coria. Federation Bells has larger flowers, I think, sort of pink and pale yellow from memory. Yeah, Betty says yeah. Federation Bells and Fat Fred are 2 really good corias to grow for the look of their flowers. So yeah, there we are. How's that? My memory's pretty good. Thanks, Betty, telling me I was right. Look, folks, here's your time. If you want to throw anything at me about birds or habitat gardening, plants, maybe your thoughts about mistletoe. Betty, have you got any mistletoe growing at your property for people who haven't come across Betty before in the comments? I think Betty is a member of the Riot Squad now. She's commented frequently on many shows. Why the Riot Squad? People may ask. A collective noun for kookaburras is a riot. So the Bird Emergency has a Riot Squad in the comments. So that's great. And Betty says, good, she chose them so the birds can get their beaks in. Yep, the corias are really great. And so many of the corias flower in autumn and winter rather than spring and summer. So, yeah, they're a really good plant that in the southeast of Australia sort of follows up that glut of eucalyptus flowering period, and what was the other one I was thinking of? It doesn't matter. And Betty's got no mistletoe at her place. So, did you always have that thought, Betty, that mistletoe was something that you didn't want to encourage? I think after hearing from Dave, I think all gardeners should be thinking, hey, yeah, we could get some mistletoe. I'll do a mistletoe habitat gardening. I don't know whether Dave's generally doing woodworking or going to garage sales and clearing sales and making stuff on a Saturday. But it'd be great. I might pre-record a gardening thing with mistletoe for him. I'll talk to him about that and see if we can get him back on for that wealth of knowledge about mistletoes and actually about everything. Dr. Dave's pretty amazing. Okay. So, well, Betty, there is the common misconception, I think, as Dave and I were talking about. When I studied horticulture, that was what we all thought. If you had lots of mistletoes in a tree, it would kill the tree. I think the evidence pretty clearly says that's not the case. Often in periods of drought, trees die, and people would think ascribe the death to infestations by mistletoe. But no, the trees die because of the drought, and the mistletoes die too. My sort of thoughts nowadays would be, Betty, if you see mistletoes, leave them be. And as Dave pointed out, that they flower in periods where their host tree isn't flowering, so it extends the feeding opportunities for all of those honey eaters and flower, nectar and pollen dependent bats, gliders, other possums, insects, beetles, moths, butterflies. They all use them. So yeah, that would be really cool. Okay, folks, I'm just going to put the music on a little bit, and we'll just chill out a little bit, and if anyone's got anything else they would like to say, we'll keep going for a little while. Now on Monday, Gregory Andrews is joining me for our Monday midday show. And Gregory has been doing a lot of protests because Gregory lives in Canberra. Gregory has been doing a lot of protesting and contacting politicians about climate change, biodiversity, our conservation laws. So we're going to talk about that, and also the sort of change in direction that he's taking with wombat rise, lyrebird dreaming that we spoke about when Gregory was on the show about a year ago. So we'll be following that up, and it's not confirmed yet, but I think on Wednesday next week, Claire Hawkins, who is sort of the coordinator and running the Where We're Wedgie counts in Tasmania. I think Claire's coming on Wednesday, and the Where We're Wedgie counts in Tasmania are happening this weekend and also next weekend. So we're going to get Claire in the middle. Hopefully that's going to work out. And if you don't know about Where We're Wedgie, you can get the rationale behind it, and the sort of the results over the years that Where We're Wedgie has been going, and we'll just chew the fat a bit and talk about some of the Tasmanian issues that are happening at the moment. Tomorrow I'm going to move my camera too, so I'm not looking when I'm looking at the screen and reading comments and stuff. You know, do the thing. Do the thing. Folks, I think that's about where we're going to end it for today. Habitat Gardening, Saturday morning, 9:30 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, GMT +10, and Monday at midday Australian Eastern Standard Time. Talk to me and Gregory Andrews. Now I might pop up in between, but they're the next two that are scheduled with a guest, and Claire Hawkins, hopefully we're confirming that, and that'll be next Wednesday. Thanks, commenters. It's great when you jump in and help me keep things moving. This is the Bird Emergency. I'm Grant. I am a bird nerd. I was also joined by my sometime co-host, housemate, avian advisor, Loz the Rainbow Lorikeet. I look forward to joining you next time. If you're watching me on a platform other than YouTube, I'd still love it if you popped over to thebirdemergency.com/YouTube and subscribed, because sometimes I just go on YouTube. So if you want to catch some of the things that don't go on the other things, YouTube's where to do it. See ya.